Hello everyone. Let us continue with the discussion of the chapter on the face of it. Today we'll be dealing with the questions carrying 6 marks for this chapter. So the first question is, how did Mr. Lam try to give courage and confidence to Derry? Throughout the story, I have been repeating the same point that Mr. Lam was a motivating force for Derry. So it's quite evident that he tried to give courage and confidence to Derry in any way it was possible. So let us see how it was done. Derry suffers from an acute sense of self-hatred and rejection. Self-hatred, hating oneself; rejection, rejection by the society due to his physical appearance because of his burnt face. Feels he's very ugly and no one will ever love him. Mr. Lam too has heard Derry only complain and bemoan about himself. So what do we mean by bemoan? Bemoan is only going on and on about your self. Moaning and mourning the disability that you have, and only talking bad about yourself. He feels very sad, Mr. Lamb. He is very sad to see a 14-year-old boy giving up on life just because of his physical disability. So at first, startles Derry with a strange talk. In the first itself, we read that Mr. Lamb doesn't start directly talking about his physical illness, Derry's physical illness to him. He starts with a strange talk. This makes him comfortable. This makes Derry realize that, oh, he's the first person who has not made a cruel comment about my face at the first time he saw me. So he tells Derry that he is interested in everything God has created. His encouraging words has a magical effect on Derry. Everyone and everything is essentially same. So this point is brought up in the chapter by the example of the weed and the flower that Mr. Lamb gives Derry. The notion of the beauty is relative, and his concept of the world and friendship baffle, but appeal to Derry, and he gets fascinated by the old man. So what does this line mean? This line means that the notion of the beauty, it's relative. It changes. Notion of beauty, it is different for everyone. And Mr. Lamb's concept of the world and friendship, it at first startles Derry. It at first confuses Derry. But as the story goes on and on, as they go on talking, Derry gets fascinated. Derry gets inspired by the old man. He is, happy to hear him, motivate him. So slowly, due to the encouraging words and due to the great examples, great contrast set by Mr. Lamb, he sheds his complex. He sheds his, depressing thought cycle about his ugliness, and he rediscovers the joy of life. So this is how Mr. Lamb gave courage and confidence to them. The lesson, on the face of it, is an apt depiction of loneliness and sense of alienation experienced by people on the account of disability. So let us first understand the question. Lesson, on the face of it, is an apt depiction of loneliness and the sense of alienation. What is the sense of alienation? Sense of alienation is being away from everything, being alienated, being enclosed somewhere, being trapped and not in exposure to other people. So this is the sense of alienation and loneliness which is experienced by people on the account of their disability. This is very, very, very common in our society to, make people with disabilities lonely, feel them and make them feel alienated. This is a very deep rooted mindset in our society that these people with physical disabilities, they are born with a defect and they should be treated differently. They are seen with a different eye. So this is the main theme that this story deals with. Loneliness and sense of alienation experienced by Mr. Lamb and Derry on the account of disability. So this chapter obviously talks about loneliness and sense of alienation which is experienced by Derry and Mr. Lamb. The author has set up two different people as the main characters who have physical disability to talk about this theme only. The actual pain and inconvenience caused by the disabilities is often much less than the sense of alienation felt by the disabled person. So this is a very good point. The actual pain and inconvenience which the disability causes them, it's much less than the cruel comments and the different treatment they are given, the sense of alienation they are provided with. And this needs to be stopped. Derry suffered from severe negative complexes because of his burnt face. Derry suffered from withdrawal, deviance, because of his burnt face. He became a pessimistic loner who indulged in self-pity and was always suspicious of the intention of others. You must know who is a pessimist. Pessimist is someone who is an opposite of an optimistic person. An optimistic person sees the positive side of the lives, and a pessimistic person who he or she is totally in contrast of an optimistic. He sees the reality. He sees the more real sides of the things, more the side of the things which are going to hurt us rather than being always positive. So these are the types of people who we call as pessimistic. People who do not see the all the glitters and golds. He became a pessimistic loner. Loner is a person who was always lonely, who indulged in self-pity. Self-pity is, showing sympathy, being extra sympathetic to our own selves. And he was always suspicious of the intention of others. He didn't make friends, and when he met Mr. Lam also, he was apprehensive of his intention of carrying out this friendship with Derry. He was afraid that he would do something to him, and he would also make a cruel comment to him like all of the other people. So this tells us that he was always suspicious of the intentions of others, and that is why he was so withdrawn and didn't talk to anyone. His anger and frustration made him withdrawn and an introvert. Introvert is someone who doesn't like to indulge with people, who doesn't like to be social, who doesn't like to carry out conversations, and who doesn't like to be in social gatherings. In all, he doesn't like being with people. He or she doesn't like being with people. Mr. Lamb, on the other hand, was inwardly a loner who craved for company and acceptance. But on the outside, he was jovial, outgoing, and optimistic. Jovial is a person who is full of joy, and outgoing and optimistic. He was extremely sensitive person. On one hand, on the inside, Mr. Lamb was very sensitive. He was very inward. He was also a loner like Derry. But on the outside, he was a joyful person. He was outgoing and he was optimistic. He was a person who always showed the positive side of things to other people. And on top of that, he was extremely sensitive. So it tells us that how people with disabilities, they sometimes feel something and show something else to show the world that they are not affected by their cruel comments. Derry and Mr. Lamb's physical disabilities caused pain and suffering not to their body but also to their mind and soul. So this point is somewhat similar to the second point that we discussed, that the actual pain and inconvenience caused by these disabilities that these people have, it's often much less than the sense of alienation felt by the disabled person. So how did Mr. Lamb's meeting with Derry become a turning point in Derry's life? This is a strongly valid observation that Mr. Lamb's meeting with Derry became a turning point in his life, because after that he even disagreed with his mother on going to meet Mr. Lamb. He said that if I don't go to Mr. Lamb this instant, I will not be able to step out in the world. So this tells us that just one meeting with Mr. Lam changed Derry's life so much, changed Derry's outlook towards life so much. Derry, a complex stricken lad of 14, is a victim of inferiority complex, which is born out of a misinterpretation of himself and the world. So these words might be heavy for some of you. Let me explain it in simpler words. So Derry is a complex stricken lad of 14. Derry is a person who is feeling inferior because of his disability. He's a lad, he's a boy of 14 years, and just at this tender age, he is dealing with so many emotions. He's dealing with so much cruelty that the world is throwing at him. He's a victim of inferiority complex. What is inferiority complex? Inferiority complex is a scientific term for it's a complex in which people always feel inferior. People always feel less than what they actually are. They always feel that they have less abilities. You know, they cannot do this, they cannot do that. People always make fun of them. They are not good enough. So all of these feelings when they take over a person's personality, this is known as inferiority complex. So Terry is obviously a victim of inferiority complex. So why did he develop this inferiority complex? Because he misinterpreted himself and society's viewpoint about himself. He always thought that everyone is looking only on his burnt side of the face and not anything else. No one is noticing his personality. No one wants to talk to him. Everyone is afraid of him. And due to this, he suffers from an acute sense of self-hatred and rejection. And his burnt face leads him to a total alienation. Now we come to the discussion of Mr. Lam. Mr. Lam too has a disability, but he doesn't let his handicap interfere with his peace and pleasure of life. Mr. Lam's meeting with Derry, this attitude, the attitude of not being affected by outer world, it is a turning point in Derry's life. Derry has always met people who pass comments to him, but not a person who is so carefree like Mr. Lam. So this fact itself is a turning point in Derry's life. He gives Derry confidence and persuades him to develop a positive attitude towards life. Mr. Lam tells him that being alienated, being alone, being isolated, and withdrawing from the social situations, it's not a solution to your problem. It's not a solution and it will not do any good to you. Derry's brief association with Mr. Lam proves to be quite rewarding. It proves to be quite rewarding for Mr. Lam as well as Derry. Mr. Lam teaches him a new perspective of looking at life, people, and things. Derry decides never to go back to his old seclusion. He decides he would not be isolated anymore. He would go out, see the world, and he would no longer let anyone interfere with his self-respect, his position, his personality, and his confidence. Now he will slowly learn to find a place in the main areas of his life. He would go out and present himself to the society. Mr. Lam helps Terry rediscover himself and he gives a new meaning to his life. Now Derry wants to leave his handicap behind, forge ahead in life, and live life to the fullest. Now Derry wants to leave his handicap behind, start a new life, start life from the scratch, and live it to the fullest. Derry said, it ate me up. So it refers to acid. The acid ate me up. How did this fact affect his attitude towards life? Now the whole story of Derry, the whole personality of Derry before meeting Mr. Lam revolved around this incident. The fact that the acid ate him up, his face and his personality. So obviously this was a major part of his attitude towards life. This was the reason that he was so bitter towards life. towards positive things that the life had to offer him. Derry's attitude became totally bitter after the acid burns one side of his face. He suffers from a sense of alienation, low self-esteem, and self-rejection. Derry's suffering is further aggravated by the feeling that he is unwanted and no one loves him. Now, Derry's suffering, him feeling that no one loves him and he has a burnt face, it is further aggravated by the fact that he is unwanted and no one loves him. The fact that he has a burnt face, it's further aggravated by the fact that he's unwanted and people get afraid just by seeing him and no one loves him. His behavior also results from people's indifference, lack of concern and compassion for physically impaired people. He is also so bitter because he feels that the society is very indifferent towards people with disability. They do not care about them, they show no concern to them, and they are not compassionate for physically impaired people. Instead of making them feel comfortable, they pass cruel comments to them. He feels their words of sympathy lack genuineness. So he feels very hurt when they unwittingly remind him of his impairment. So, when people offer Derry sympathy, that oh, it's so sad that you've got a half-burnt face, he feels that this sympathy is not genuine. He feels very hurt when people bring up this subject again and again to remind him of his disability. And also, Derry remains very conscious of his handicap. He says that no one will ever love him because he will continue to look ugly. The fact that he feels that his mother also kisses him on the correct side of his face, on the and not on the side where the acid fell, it tells so much about the situation that he's going through. He does not like Mr. Lamb's sermonizing, as he feels that it or nothing else cannot change the ugliness of his face. Now, the fact that Mr. Lamb is pushing him towards seeing the positive light, it feels that this motivation or nothing can change the ugliness of his face. At the end of the day, even if he accepts the fact that I don't give a damn about anyone, it cannot change the fact that his face is half burnt. Thus, Derry feels a terrible sense of frustration and loneliness due to his severely burnt face. That is why he makes the statement that it ate me up. This acid ate me